GCAF Game Changer Chat. Today we have the honor to be here with His Excellency Yusuf Tuggar, Nigerian Ambassador to Germany. So this is a very special episode for us, and welcome, Excellency, to this episode of the Game Changer Chat.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure for us to have you today. Obviously, for different reasons. One of the reasons is that you represent one, if not the most powerful economy on the African continent, but also you personally have a very interesting background yourself in entrepreneurship. So there's some very interesting perspectives that will be brought in today. And we would just like to start with you to tell the audience a bit more maybe about you and also about your background, specifically your background in entrepreneurship that you have.
Thank you very much. Well, yeah, you could say that straight out of school, I jumped into the deep end and decided to try my hand at entrepreneurship. So I have, in my capacity as a businessman, tried so many things over the years. As a young man, I was supplying parts and chemicals to refineries. I tried my hand at exporting ginger from Nigeria. This is the early 90s. Gum Arabic, trading, which included not just petroleum trading, but other, commodities. And, before ending up in the petroleum upstream, because as you know, Nigeria's mainstay for many years was oil and gas, which we've been trying to diversify away from. So, but more recently, with the strong drive of the Buhari administration towards diversification, we have seen the merging of, the old agricultural methods with the new. So if you take, for instance, Thrive Agric, which is using crowdsourcing to deliver for investors a 15 to 20% rate of return, makes it very interesting. Nigeria as a whole is full of entrepreneurs. So the concept of the market day is something that is big, to the people locally, because each town has its market day, which differs from that of its neighbors. So people, entrepreneurs move from market to market, depending on the day, to trade goods and services. So this is, a major thing that, is the mainstay. And a lot of it is still not even captured, in the formal sector. So this is something that over the years, Nigeria has been trying to do. If you look at what we've achieved in terms of banking consolidation in 2005, we moved from 89 banks to 25. And then more recently, the plans that the government has been rolling out, National Economic Recovery Growth Plan, and, more recently, the National Sustainability Plan, in reaction to the COVID pandemic, which I'll talk in more detail on as we go along.
Thanks for sharing that with us. It's quite an interesting journey. And maybe later on, we can also dive into what led you then to change sides from entrepreneur to being active for the government and playing such a key role. This is quite interesting. But before going into that, you mentioned the entrepreneurs in Nigeria, which obviously is no secret to the world, let's say, or at least to the world that is somehow active when it comes to investment, when it comes to technology. And in the last years, we have seen some entrepreneurs and some startups who really, if you want to say it this way, made it. We look at Paystack, which was acquired for more than 200 million USD in the last year by Stripe. And we also see other success examples. And looking at that, we have those big successes, of course, but I can imagine that you're looking for even more. You're looking for even greater success. And in this context, it would be interesting to understand how the Nigerian government is promoting that entrepreneurial spirit that is already there and that becomes bigger and bigger in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Paystack example is quite astounding, bought for over $200 million with over 80,000 merchants across Africa. There's several other examples. Flutterwave is a startup, payment system valued at over $1 billion. You've got digital explorers, handling remote and physical placement of Nigerian software developers, in places like, as far flung as Lithuania, Canada. You've got Andala, with remote campuses in Lagos, in Nairobi, in Kampala. But you see, all of this is benefiting from, the legal and structural framework put in place by the government and supported and tweaked, every so often. So if you look at what happened in Nigeria in 2002, 2003, we introduced the GSM phone lines. We went from landlines, to GSM phone lines. And today, well, I would say even 2015, we had an estimated 150 million GSM lines with a population of 200 million. So, you can see the level of penetration there. And 60% of the users are on the internet. But, these are 2015 figures I'm even talking about. So it's probably higher than that. So that GSM revolutionized, the sector. It gave access to people living in villages to the internet and to e-commerce. So, if you look at the activities on Facebook and so on and so forth, they're benefiting from that GSM revolution. But beyond that, now you have an ongoing SIM registration so that every phone line is to be registered. And that also, safeguards against fraud, against criminal activity, because we're very well aware of, Nigeria's image in the past of the 419 advance fee fraud, letters from Nigerian princes and so all of that. So because we've had that experience, we're able to conceive of methods at tackling such, cybercrime and we have a lot of young entrepreneurs that are coming up with very, very pragmatic solutions. So that SIM registration is an example. Broadband connectivity is expanding, taking the internet to very young, energetic people. We have a youthful population, so they're doing all sorts of creative things with it. You've got the likes of Galaxy Backbone that is owned by the Nigerian government. That has been around for quite some time. It's expanding. You've got there's a national plan, for expanding the broadband that continues to grow along with microwave. So it's not just the broadband. It's very flexible, very pragmatic. But then, again, the e-commerce in Nigeria, as it continues to grow, is taking advantage of, for instance, and we spoke about this a while back, the Nigerian interbank settlement system, which has been in place since 1994. And it allows for bank-to-bank transactions to be concluded in real time. So going back to 1994, we've had this. And, if you compare it to, let's say, an M-Pesa is not direct and it's not, between banks. Therefore, it's a twofold high volume, high margin transaction. And, it's M-Pesa is also capped. You can't do transactions, I think, beyond $1,500. this is different with the interbank settlement system. It's owned collectively by the Central Bank of Nigeria and the commercial banks. So settlement is in real time, allows for speed, allows for transactions, multiple transactions within a very short period of time. We've got other legal regulatory framework. In 2014, we have we introduced the critical infrastructure strategy. We've got, of course, the Infrastructure Concessioning Regulatory Commission that allows for public-private partnerships. It's well structured. 2015, we had the Cybercrime Act. We have also a national identity number scheme that is being expanded. It was already there. And this is on top of a bank verification number. So every bank account holder in Nigeria has a BVN, has a bank verification number. So all these things facilitate for the free flow of trade and commerce. And then we're supporting all of this with the Presidential Enabling Environment Council that is trying to improve the ease of doing business. So you can register a business easily, very much easier than in the past. Startups can start, within just within a matter of days, it's going from strength to strength.
Thank you for that overview. And if I understand correctly, maybe let me try to summarize also for our audience. It is that the government sees its role mainly in providing a certain infrastructure that can then be used, be it technological, financial, that can then be used by the entrepreneur, as that spirit is there already. And this is quite interesting. And also hearing those examples, I think few people would know of the banking system that is in place already since the 90s that obviously facilitates things. And then also looking at different developments in the Nigerian entrepreneur or tech scene, you see that also a lot is going actually into fintech. So this is quite interesting to hear also what the government is doing in that regard. And Excellency, obviously many of our listeners and viewers are coming from Germany, and Nigeria is a name also in Germany, especially among those who deal with making business, doing business on the African continent. I think Nigeria is quite well known. And in one of our conversations, on our previous conversations, we mentioned that Nigeria is the natural partner for German SMEs, but maybe even German startups who want to enter specifically West African markets or to think about engaging more in Africa. And it would be interesting if you would elaborate a bit more on that, why Nigeria as a natural partner for specifically German SMEs and maybe even startups.
Absolutely. You see, Germany, has mastered the application of research to industrial production. And, in doing so, has created world-class Mittelstands, family-sized, medium-sized, family-owned, medium-sized companies that are seeking to expand into Africa, and they're doing this on the basis of the reliability and durability of German products, So this is well recognized in Africa. But then, in doing so, you need local partners. So my take is that, the Nigerian entrepreneurs are the natural partners for the German Mittelstands to expand in Africa. Leave aside the fact that Nigeria is the largest market in Africa, has the largest economy, has the most populace. You also have the approach of the Nigerian entrepreneurs who appreciate the long-term value of money. So their focus is not turnover. It's not just short-term, their focus is turnover and not just short-term profit. And because of that approach, if you go across Africa, most countries that you would visit, you will find Nigerian banks present, and not just one. you would see a GT Bank, you would see a UBA, you'd see a Zenith, First Bank, Access Bank. In the same vein, you would also see a Dangote, you would see a Bua, flour mill, cement plant, and so forth. If you go to places like Tanzania, for instance, you'd see Sahara Energy. This is a group that has been built over the years by three friends who were classmates in school. And today they're controlling 75% of the national volume of petroleum products in Tanzania. So you look across Africa, who is the main supplier of products? It's Nigerian detergents, it's Nigerian soap, it's Nigerian mosquito repellents, and so on and so forth. So, for entrepreneurs with that approach, they are natural allies to any businesses with an ambition towards expanding in Africa. So this was the point I was making. But if you look at media and entertainment as well, Nigeria up until the COVID pandemic had perhaps the fastest growing media and entertainment sector in the world.
Wow, in the world?
Yes, one of the fastest, yeah, because Nollywood today is the third largest movie industry in the world after, arguably, some even say second. After Hollywood and Bollywood, it's Nollywood. If you look at music today, I don't know if you've seen the new Coming to America movie with Eddie Murphy.
Of course.
Yeah. So you see there playing the music, you come across Davido, for instance. So these guys have gone global, and continue. We talked about Burna Boy and Wizkid, and so all of this, has captured Africa. Africa is watching Nollywood. So if you want to partner, if you want to make movies itself, if you look at, the behind the camera, technology and industry, if you will, the cameras, makeup, lighting, you name it, it's all there. So, it's a revenue-driven agenda versus profit-driven agenda. And the Nigerians tend to focus on the revenue-driven agenda. So more long-term. That's quite interesting with the German approach as well.
That's quite interesting how you now frame that Nigeria actually, if you look at the Nigerian market, that the companies that are already there that can be potential partners do not only look at their home market, but actually have already expanded into different markets, and that this can be a quite interesting approach then for German companies to have those companies who have a higher reach in the region and also on the continent to approach them for partnerships and so on and so forth. That's quite interesting. And I must say, Excellency, before we had our first discussion, I would have never thought that I would have a conversation with an ambassador, and names like Burna Boy and Davido would drop. So that's quite refreshing. And also, I must say, for those viewers who don't know these artists, I think it's worth a look to check out also the music and entertainment industry, because I think this is sometimes a sector that investors and also companies neglect when looking at economies, whereas it's a quite important sector. So this is a quite insightful statement from your side. And now looking at those investors, at those SMEs who want to actually go to Nigeria, who have their plans ready, who may have listened to this conversation and think, okay, it's worth a look. What kind of infrastructure is there for them to help them to make their first steps? Is there something where they can, so to say, use it as a plug into the Nigerian business world?
Just to add that, with what you said about my previous comments, for me, Wakanda is real and it's in Nigeria. It's not just in the movies, So, the earlier you get there, the better.
We like to hear it.
Yeah. But there are numerous resources here in the embassy, starting from our website where there's, actually quite a lot of information to be accessed. You also have PEBEC, which I mentioned earlier. PEBEC has a website, and you can easily check it out, which is the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, which is supposed to track, monitor, and improve on the ease of doing business in Nigeria. It's actually monitored directly by the Vice President's office. So it's there to support startups, to support businesses. But we're also doing a lot of infrastructure projects that, the embassy itself is very much involved in. If you look at what Siemens is doing today in Nigeria, Siemens is expanding on transmission and distribution of electricity in Nigeria. So it's not just about generating capacity. We now have the capacity to generate more than we're able to transmit and distribute, and Siemens is doing that. So infrastructure, electricity brings internet, brings power for industrial production to businesses. So all of that is happening. We introduced the idea of blending development finance institution funding with export credit agency resources. So Euler Hermes in the case of Germany, with the Kano Maradi project, which is building a rail line from Nigeria to Niger Republic and taking advantage of the African continental free trade agreement, for instance. So that's a major infrastructure project that is going to unleash so much potential in a corridor that is known as the Lakaji Trade and Transport Corridor, which is one of the most important trade and transport corridors in Africa. That's Lagos, Kano, Jibia, and all the way to Maradi. So it links the ports with, the hinterland of Africa. So that is going to create so many jobs. There's so much information out there on such infrastructure projects and opportunities. And then you have the likes of DEG of Germany with a desk in Access Bank, that's quite vibrant. There's a lot of information, and resources that can be tapped into as well.
Thank you, Excellency. And we're already about to wrap up the session. It was quite insightful from why entrepreneurs making such a wave in Nigeria. We talked about the infrastructure that has been set up there for decades. We talked about also ways or sectors that are maybe not on the map of every investor, like music and entertainment industry, but also, let's say, the tech side of it. And then last but not least, now, if one wants to engage, if you're watching this video and you think about finding out more about the Nigerian market, then obviously the embassy will be at your service and happy to support, as I understood it just now, but also other institutions are there that can facilitate. Excellency, thank you so much for this conversation with you. It was quite insightful and quite refreshing. And if you have a few words for our audience still at the end of the session, then please feel free to address them.
Nigeria, Wakanda exists. It's in Nigeria. Nigeria is Wakanda. And there are resources I haven't mentioned. The Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission, it has its website. There's a lot of information. There's also the Nigeria Export Promotion Commission. So those two are additional sources of information and resource.
Thank you, Excellency. Hope to see you soon, and thanks for taking the time for us.